Hello and welcome. You're joining us live for the Investor Lab. Gabby, I think we nailed the timing, but we forgot to turn the music down because you kept getting lost in the sauce.
No, I'm turning it down. No. We do a slow fade out here. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
No,
let's
we'll
have. Okay. Let's have a post-production meeting. That's okay. That's all good. I'm excited for today, Gabby. I'm excited for today because today's topic is, I think, something that we care really deeply about.
Yes.
And so I'm really excited to get into today. But before we do, if you are here, let us know live. If you're here live, let us know in the chat. We'd love to see you here live. We'd love to see the community building week in, week out. And today's topic is actually going to be pretty interesting. And it's a little different to what we would normally do, but I think it's actually quite important. And Gabby, if you allow me to do a little bit of a setup, I'll throw to you because I know that this is something you're quite passionate about as well. Hey, Bex. Hey, Brendan. Great to see you. Let us know in the chat if you are here. Matthew, great to see you. So one of the challenges we have here is, and if you're listening to this channel and if you have been participating in this journey, is we are developing an insight or have developed an insight. And when I say we, I mean me, Gabby, and you listening, yourself here right now. I've developed an insight that other people don't necessarily have. And I was talking to someone the other day, someone who is probably going to be listening to this episode and they'll know who they are. And they mentioned to me, we were talking about the impact of AI and we were talking about the impact of monetary debasement and all of the things that we've been talking about on this channel for most of this year. In fact, it's June now. We've been talking about this stuff for like 6 months now, which is really interesting. And he said that he walks down the street and he just feels, he just sees all of these people that are just so unaware that the world around them is changing and why it's changing and what is happening. And he feels helpless. He can see all of these people that are about to have their lives changed so rapidly over the next few years. And he doesn't have the capability to change all these people, to help people understand. And I think that when we go on this journey of understanding and knowledge development, I think we all feel that way at some point. We all feel like we've suddenly discovered something that other people just don't understand. And I remember we first had that when we discovered property investing. We were like, what? Like, how does this work? Like, and I remember even the first time that I read Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad. Yeah, so many people will be able to relate to that because, you know, for many people, that was the moment where they suddenly like kind of finance and investing started to kind of make sense. It's obviously a massively transformational book for a lot of people. And you go on this journey and all of a sudden you can become kind of the raving madman or mad woman in your group who's like, oh my God, I've just worked this thing out. And oh my God, this is how it all works. And you start to have these kind of brain spasms and other people don't necessarily come along for the ride. And that can be a problem. And I actually remember when we started out on our property journey and, you know, at that time we were still in the event sector, doing all of that kind of stuff. And we kind of had cracked onto this idea of property investing and started to learn about it. We started trying to tell people because we felt like we just discovered fire, but the people around us weren't ready for the message. Now, fast forward 6, 7, 8 years, however long it's been since that time. And those people are still broadly stuck where they were. They haven't progressed or they haven't made informed and intelligent decisions. I was actually talking to some of the team the other day and it's like most of my friends and family have not actually worked with Dashdot, which is insane, right? Which is completely insane when you really think about it. And that's, you know, because you know, we've bought over 2,100 properties. We've helped over 1,800 people to build very significant amounts of wealth. Average return on invested capital in the first 12 months of 73%. I mean, if you went anywhere in the world and said, hey, there's this way you can invest that on average across several thousand investments has achieved an average return on invested capital in the first 12 months of 73%, you'd be like, what the hell? This is crazy. And that's better than Bitcoin returns, right? But the thing is, unless you can get the message to people in the right way, you can't actually help people to move from where they are now to where they need to be. And we all are in a position now where I hope that by listening to this podcast, you've started to discover, you've started to learn, if you started to come to the realization that there are some major forces that are driving the world around us. Number one is liquidity and monetary debasement. That is a big one. And honestly, my understanding of that helps me to sleep well at night because I know that I don't need to worry about anything because money is going to keep getting printed. And because I know what that means, It means I'm like, well, it doesn't really matter. The sun goes up, the sun comes down, and the money printer goes burr. Pretty simple, right? And so I can use that as a framework to understand the world around me and how to invest and how to stay sane and calm and safe. And vice versa, there's also AI, which is going to come and disrupt so much of the world we live in. And the things that we take for granted are going to be very different in the next few years. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a dystopian future, but it's going to be different. It's going to be a lot of change. And we're in this position where we almost have this secret truth, this secret that most people don't know. I would say 97% of people, maybe more, don't understand. Maybe 99% of people, if you think en masse, don't actually really grok the fact that all of this is happening, that the monetary debasement is the reason that prices go up and the reason that it's getting harder to get ahead, and the AI is coming to change everything. And the way that I sort of think, and I promise I'm not going to talk for the entire 45 minutes, Gabby, but I just want to kind of flesh through this. You know, the challenge is we have this secret, right? We know that something is happening. We know that there are things that are happening, and other people can't see it. And it's almost like if you knew that a great flood was, it's almost like Noah and his ark. Not that I'm a religious person, but it's almost like Noah, right? He was building the ark, and he's like, "Hey, a big flood's coming, a big flood's coming, big flood's coming," and he was building the boat, but nobody believed him, right? And so, you know, in the end, the great flood came. Now, if you knew that there was a big flood coming, and you had a boat, and you knew that you needed to get people on the boat, or they were going to get left behind, how hard would you try and get people on the boat? And what we want to uncover in this episode is to talk about that, to talk about some ways to actually help the people around you to go on this journey with you. Because there's no point you understanding what this looks like and climbing to the top of the mountain alone and standing on a peak all by yourself. I've actually done that, by the way. I actually, many years ago, I climbed to the second or third highest peak in Africa, and I stood on top of that mountain, basically alone. I was with some strangers, but basically alone. And I looked out across the view from that mountaintop, and that was the moment that I realized that happiness is only truly when shared. That was the statement that came into my mind as I stood on top of Mount Bua in Ethiopia. I looked around and I was like, wow, I have no one to share this with. Happiness is only truly when shared. And so there's no point you putting the oxygen mask on yourself if you're not also willing to try and put the oxygen mask on other people as well. And for Dashdot, our purpose, and you know, Dashdot is obviously an extension of Gabby and I, but for Dashdot, our purpose is that we exist to improve the lives of others by helping them to make more informed, more intelligent investment decisions so they can live more confident, more prosperous, and more fulfilling lives. That is the purpose that has driven us since the very start, since 2019, when we very first got going. And we've been driven by 3 core beliefs. And these 3 core beliefs are that we believe that everyone has a right to a life of freedom, choice, and abundance. Number 2 is that we believe that the greatest impact we can have in our community is by helping people to build wealth so they can directly and indirectly benefit the lives of those around them. And we believe that through innovation and empathy, we can democratize property investing, change lives, and change the world. But it's the second one that I want to hang on to a little bit here, because I think it's very important. We believe that the greatest impact we can have in our community is by helping people to build wealth so they can directly and indirectly benefit the lives of those around them. And that's really important. It's a very important thing. This isn't just like, yo, let's go get rich. Yeah. Actually, it's, what does it mean? What does it mean when you become the person that changes the bloodline? You know, we just had a couple of our clients, Lisa and Indy, and they, you know, mother and daughter, single mom and daughter, invested together, came from not much, didn't have a lot, invested together because they had to pool their resources together. And now they've exited their property and they've made enough money that both of them can go buy a principal place of residence. And that was something they never thought was going to be possible for them. That's changing the direction of their entire family forever. That is a bloodline shifting move in that. And so we have this opportunity to actually have these massive impacts on other people. But further than that, at a community level, the ripple expands even further. So not only is it going to be better for you and better for your family and better for your kids, but actually you can inspire others. You can actually be the beacon that spreads the message to others and insights change. And through that, you actually start to create a network effect of change. And that network effect of change spills over. So you help you and your immediate circle to actually transform their life and their experience and the way they can contact and interact with the world around them. But then somebody else around you, if you can just get the message to them, they can start to do that too. And that's like a little seed that gets planted and grows and grows and grows. They plant a seed for somebody else, it grows. They plant a seed for somebody else, it grows. And together as a community, we can all rise each other up. Now, we've talked about the fact that, you know, we're heading to a place where we're going to have a barbell economy. That is already happening. The middle class is getting hollowed out. We have asset owners and we have consumers. And so we're in a place where the gap between the haves and have-nots is going to get wider. And so we need to keep throwing that lifeline out a little bit further and a little bit further and trying to pull more people onto the boat so that we can all create more prosperity together and to try and balance that scale a little bit more. And so that is the episode that we're going to be talking about today. And Gabby, you wanted to talk about this episode a lot as well. So I'm keen to throw it to you. Sorry for my 11-minute monologue.
Did you just look at the time and go, oh, wow, it's 11 minutes?
Yeah. I did. Yeah.
No, like it's all the same for me, right? It's all like I personally have been on a bit of a quest with this for a very long time. And I think particularly this year, since we've been doing the Investor Lab again, it's become more and more pointed as we're learning more and more about the economy and technology and how things are likely to shift in the near future. But for me, it's like the whole reason we started Dashdot was for this kind of focus. It's like trying to help other people, because I don't see a point in me just rapidly scaling my own wealth if I'm not directly impacting other people. Like, to me, that's me. I'm very service oriented and I care about helping other people in ways that maybe they don't have the skills to be able to do themselves, or they don't have the knowledge, or they haven't had the privilege to be able to access the information to be able to do that. And I think particularly in like the last year or so, like that's been a journey since the start of Dashdot, right? So that's just been when we started learning about property investing and how it can change lives. We started still by helping people. And then in the last couple of years, realizing like why it's so necessary in terms of everything that's changing and the structure of the economy. Being able to share that message, it's gotten more important.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in the last year, I particularly, I've been loving doing this podcast again with you, Goose, because being able to just find ways every week where we can try and like give you a little bit more insight every week. And so for me, it's like I still have people in my life, like one of my close friends, she is really struggling financially. And I personally really struggle with that because I've made a lot of wealth and I'm trying to find ways to cut through to her to be able to help. And I haven't quite cracked it yet, but because I think people have a lot of resistance. They hear particularly like money, like a lot of people have so many money stories, but they also, it's like they just don't want to think about it. They don't understand it. A lot of people, there can be an intelligence gap as well, and we need to accept that as well, that it actually is just too confusing, and so they don't want to think about it, and that's not fair. Like, it's not fair that those people who feel confused about it lose out because somebody couldn't find a way to cut through to them. And so this is kind of what I'm working on personally, is trying to find new ways that we can help to cut through and then help those people to cut through, and it spreads naturally, and we just we end up on the right side of that bell bar, right?
Yeah. I bell bar. No, I 100% agree, and I think like the what you just said there, like it's not fair for some people to miss out just because they didn't have the information, right? And you have an information asymmetry. Well, one of the things I've noticed, and this is why building wealth for yourself is actually so important. It's because you also have to lead through example. It's one thing to say, hey, I've got this idea. Did you know? Let me tell you about this idea. It's another thing entirely to do it. And then for people to say, how did you do that? And then you can teach them and then you can show them, right? Now, there's a balance between those two, because if it's going to take you 5 years to get to a place where you can kind of like show, not just tell, right? Which is maybe a fair time. Does that mean that over that 5 years, you just go, well, I'm not going to tell anyone what I'm doing. I won't take the chance to help other people. No, I don't think that's an appropriate method. But if you can show people along the way and communicate to people along the way what you're doing, what's working, what you're learning, all of that kind of stuff, you can start to take people along for the ride. Because as we've already discussed in previous episodes, a lot's going to change in the next 5 years. So if you think, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and do X, Y, and Z, then I'm going to tell everyone how I did it to inspire them, the world is going to be very different, right? And you see that a lot even in the property space. There's a lot of people out there who have got 20 or 30 property portfolios, and I'm very happy for them. No problem. Fantastic. That's wonderful. That's great. But a lot of those people built those portfolios in a very different time, in a very different time, under very different conditions, with very different lending policies, with very different, lots of stuff was very different. And so what worked for them might not work for you today. Right. And so, and it's the same thing in business. You can look at people who built very successful businesses maybe 10 years ago, and they're famous for it. Their business knowledge might not even be appropriate today. And so part of what we need to do is we need to have the courage and the humility to share along the way, knowing that what we have is imperfect, but it is on the right path. We have progress over perfection. And, I think really trying to work out how to connect with people, I think, is really the most important thing, right? And if you're listening to this podcast, you have an information asymmetry, right? We have taken information and given it to you, I hope, right, in a way that has landed with you and helped create transformation for you and create these new ideas in your mind. That information can stay with you, and you can feel too intimidated to want to then share that information or to communicate that information to other people. Maybe you don't feel confident enough. Or you could take the other angle and say, you know what, I have an obligation to try and help people, because it's not fair for other people to miss out. It's not fair that just because some people don't have the information, they're going to miss out on this opportunity. And so how you do that really, really matters, because I remember the first person who was trying to tell me about monetary debasement. Honestly, I just thought they were mad. Like they were like, they were like, oh, Goose, you don't understand. The money's broken. And like, if everyone just understood that the money was broken, my God, everyone would do the thing. And I was like, shut up. I was like,
crazy man.
Yeah, I was like, shut up, dude. Like, no, I'm not interested. I was like, I don't. And so, but finding a way, by the way, obviously now I get it. And I'm like, oh my God, he was right. Just the message the message didn't match. And so, finding ways to, like, practical ways to help people go on that journey is very, very important, because I'll state this again. If you, and look, by the way, I see this all the time, even in families where one partner, it's often the husband, but it's not always the husband, right? In a relationship, has kind of gone on a journey and has like kind of like, fucking hell, like, we really need to invest. We need to do all this. Like, they get very into it, but they haven't taken their partner along for the journey, right? And so as a result, you end up with these two different speeds or two different understandings happening within the relationship, and people get stuck because you're not able to take each other on the same journey. And so, taking the time to work out, okay, how do we enroll people to this future? And this isn't some kind of like cult-like enrollment. We're not asking you to enroll people into the cult of, the investor. It's not that at all. It's like, how do we enroll people in an understanding of the future and an understanding of what steps to take? Because if we could all just think about your parents, think about your brother and sister, if you've got them, think about your wife, think about your kids, think about your husband, think about your partner, think about your whatever, and just imagine a future where you made it to the other side and they got left behind. Just imagine that. Just imagine that. Just imagine, like, even like, depending on how old you are, just think about your parents, for example. Just imagine if they got left behind. Now, you may be like, okay, well, they don't get it, so I'm just going to build enough wealth so I can take care of them, which is kind of my point of view. They don't understand it. That's cool. All good. I can only take them so far. So what we'll do is we'll build enough wealth so that we can take care of them, and that's okay. But what about your friends? What about the other people in your life that you care about? Do you just want them to be left behind too? Do you want them to wake up one day in a position that they can't get out of it anymore because the money's been debased so much that they just can't possibly get ahead? Like all assets worth owning are too expensive and they can't get on the bandwagon. So understanding how to get into these conversations is really, really important. And there's a lot that we can talk about today. There's a lot of kind of frameworks and stuff. But what I'd love to do is I'd love to jump into one framework to kind of start these conversations, the 3R awareness method. It might be a good place to go, Gabby. What do you think?
Yeah, awesome. Yep.
So, because it's very easy when you start to get this information to feel like you can start to see the matrix. I know that's how I've felt plenty of times. The further I go on this journey of understanding, and I'm still on a journey of understanding too, the further that I go on the journey of understanding, the deeper I go. Like at first it was, as I say, reading Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It was like, oh my God, did you know that you need to invest? You need to move through the quadrant, you know,
Quadrant.
and, you know,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you gotta become an owner and all, you know, all that. That's
It's
great.
a great
right?
book, by the way.
Sick.
As a tool for like helping people as well.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, I'm not bagging the book, right? But like that level of knowledge is so simple to me now. Now I'm looking at like bond term premier spreads, all right, across different countries because I'm understanding things on a different level, right? And every time I crack open a level, it's like I can see deeper and deeper and deeper into the matrix. Now, the problem with that is that if you go too deep too quickly, you're just going to be the crazy guy in the room, crazy guy or girl in the room. Like, did you know that the money's broken? You know, like, and it's just not going to make any sense to people. And so the best way that I've found to start to have these conversations is, and I broke it down into a 3-part framework. The 3 R's, we'll call it, right? So it's relate, reveal, and reframe is the idea here. Because I haven't had there has not been a single time in the last 6, 8, 12 months where I've said to someone, hey, have you noticed, doesn't it feel like it's getting harder to get ahead? I haven't had a single person say, no, don't know what you mean. Like everyone feels it, right? In fact, Australia has been in its it just momentarily came out of its longest per capita recession in history. And I think it's just about to dip back into a per capita recession, right? So in a very real terms, things are hard for people. And so a very simple way to start to connect with people on this topic is to actually just open up that ear. Like, I don't know about you, but like, does it feel like it's getting harder to get ahead? Like, is a very interesting and simple way to kind of open up the conversation. And that's a way to start with the relate section. So to start with a shared kind of point of view or a shared concern or a shared emotion. You know, have you noticed how things feel more expensive lately than they used to? Have you noticed that your money doesn't seem to go as far as it did? Have you ever wondered why, like, our parents could buy a home with like one single income and why it's harder for us today? Do you ever wonder if you're going to be able to buy a family home? Have you ever wondered why our parents could buy homes, but you know, kids in their, or you know, kids, listen to me, fogey, people in their 20s, 30s are struggling to buy homes? Have you ever wondered? Now that creates a shared concern. Now I'm just going to quickly grab something here because I'm just sorry to, but I was reading something from Deloitte Access Economics, and I was reading about the Carrie Bradshaw Index, which is super interesting.
Yes,
by the way, as a little segue. So the Carrie Bradshaw Index is a measure of how much someone must earn to comfortably live alone, named after the Sex and the City protagonist. The index showed that a salary of $116,000 is needed to afford a 1-bedroom rental in Sydney, and yet the median wage is only $90,000. Brisbane and Adelaide in a similar kind of unaffordability ratio based on the median incomes of those cities versus what it costs to rent a 1-bedroom home. So a single person can't afford to live alone. It's crazy, right? And many people are feeling that, particularly in this day and age where we have a lot more people who are delaying having a family because of a lot of it's got to do with finances. You know, geez, I'm not even sure if I can afford that. Not sure if I'm ready for that. So we can start to connect with people and relate on that level. Before I move on to the next point, Gabby, have you got anything you want to add on the relate R?
I think it's really important with that. I'm very big on empathy, right? In case anyone hasn't picked that up, I think such a fundamental ability of us as humans is our ability to see things from another person's perspective and then use that to communicate with them in a way that helps things to land. And so with the relate point, it's really meeting people where they are. And before you start kind of approaching any of these conversations, it's thinking about why, like if I want to talk to them about money and try and help them to learn about it, what potential situations have meant that they are in the current situation that they are, and think through maybe what their reasons will be. So like Bex shared that a lot of people are just cynical. Like they just, don't want to believe
which
it.
is
Other
fear,
people,
actually, by the way,
other
which I'm
people,
going to come back to that.
Yeah, other people are just genuinely scared and then they just don't want to talk about it. Some people feel overwhelmed. And thinking through where that person might be as the starting point to this conversation of trying to figure out, how do I frame this in a way that doesn't feel like I'm just interrogating them? So I'm just thinking through what's a way that I can ask this question to start the conversation.
I'm just going to turn the 3 R's into the 4 R's, actually. Right?
Bonus R, Goose. Wow.
Just got a bonus R, everyone. This is what you get by joining live. You get a bonus R. TGIF, we get an extra R. TGIF. So let me actually walk through the 4 R's, because I actually think it might actually kind of like let's go through all of them, and then we can kind of roll around in them a little bit more, right? Cool. So the first step is to relate. So like I said, man, have you noticed this? And that's actually pretty easy to come up with. Like you might be hanging out with so sometimes when I think of this, like I like to picture real people, right? So I like to picture like if I'm having a conversation with a friend, right? I was out for dinner with a friend and we went out to a steak restaurant, had a little bit of a bro date, and he was concerned about what he was going to order on the menu because the money was tight. Mm-hmm. Totally fine, totally fair, all good. But that's a great segue to actually start to open up the conversation. It's like, it's tough these days, isn't it? Very easy to so these things can come up. Or I like to think about family members that we might have and be like, how do you feel about this? And have you noticed that? And start to open up those conversations, right? So the relatability aspect of it is very important. Then reveal. So that's where you start to gently introduce the insight or the shift of perspective. So have you noticed this? I mean, it's crazy. So, and then you can say, look, I've actually been looking into this, and here's what I've learned. Now, you don't have to be a guru. The idea here is you're not trying to be a guru. You're not trying to stand on the mountaintop and be like, I have the knowledge. Follow me. You just need to be able to say, hey, look, I've been looking into this because it's really been concerning me too. I've been thinking a lot about it. I've been doing a lot of research into it, and look, this is what I've learned. I mean, would you be interested in understanding what I've been learning about this? Would that be an interesting conversation to have? Then you can start to share. Now, you're not preaching at people. You're just being like, hey, look, I've learned some stuff. Do you want to talk about it? That can be a way to kind of get into it. Now, by the way, the friend that I had dinner with, they had the concern about the pricing on the menu. That actually happened. We ended up having a 4-hour dinner date, specifically just speaking about economics, Austrian economics, monetary debasement, all of this kind of stuff, quantity theory of money, the whole shebang. That actually opened that up. We actually ended up having like 4 hours nonstop conversation about it, and it was transformative to him, and he started to go on a journey on that. So relate, reveal. So, I mean, I've been looking into this. Would you be interested in hearing like some of the stuff that I've been learning? Because it's really interesting to me. You might find it interesting too. Again, you're not preaching, you're inviting the conversation. Then reframing it, right? So that you're not just trying to be all doom and gloom and like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. You want to avoid statements where like you gotta, right? And you want to actually just invite people on the journey. So reframing it is a way to kind of like position it back into a positive place. Look, at first, this kind of freaked me out too, because it was like, there's actually quite a lot of information to take on board, and I felt a bit overwhelmed when I was learning it too. But once I got a handle on it, I realized there's a better way to play the game. I mean, did you want me to kind of talk to you about the realizations that I had and how I how I've started to use this information, how I've started to apply this information, that actually turns it from here's the problem to here's the opportunity, right? So relate is to connect on a common issue. Reveal is, hey, I've been learning about this. Would you like me to share some information with you? And that's actually kind of sets the scene, because you sort of set the scene with information you've been learning. And then reframing is like, yeah, I mean, it's like seemed like a bit much to me too, but like, do you want to hear about how I'm using that information, what I'm doing about it? And then you can start to actually talk about how you're applying that knowledge. Is it investing in real estate? Is it did you start investing in Bitcoin? Have you started researching stuff? What have you been doing? How to reframe that? And then the fourth R, the bonus R that we just got, is risk. The bonus R is just risk. And Bex, thank you for that, because I think you're 100% correct. There is a fair amount of cynicism. People want to see that it's worked, but that's actually just fear. That's actually just fear, because they're just saying, what they're actually saying is not, I don't believe you. What they're actually saying is, I'm scared that if I try that, I will fail and I will lose. And so the fourth R is to actually start to position the cost of doing nothing. Because as we discussed on the last episode, the only absolute risk, the only certainty of failure is doing nothing. Like that is literally the only way that you can fail is by doing nothing, particularly if you have the knowledge. Now, it's one thing if you don't have the knowledge and then you don't do anything about it because you don't have the knowledge, but to have the knowledge and to do nothing is it, right? And so if you go through that process, like, and I'm just going to kind of make up some kind of steps in this. Hey, have you noticed how things are how it's getting harder to get ahead? I mean, property prices seem to keep going up faster than wages. Shopping costs more, bills cost more. It just seems like we have less disposable income, and it just feels like it's getting harder to get ahead. Yes, it does. Well, I've been looking into what's happening, and like I've been doing a fair bit of research on this. I've been learning a fair bit about it, and it's been pretty wild. I've been learning a whole bunch of stuff. Like, are you open to, would you be open to hearing what I've been learning about it? I might not have all the answers, but I think you might be interested in what I've been learning. Yes. Okay, great. I mean, well, I've been learning about how, the value of the dollar has been going down, and that's why property prices go up. That's why cost of goods goes up. But also I've been learning about how things are going to change pretty quickly in the economy over the next few years because of productivity and AI. And you can talk about all that. And look, to be honest, all of this, when I first heard it, I thought it was mad. I thought it was crazy. I was just like, this is so much information, and surely this can't be true. But the more I looked into it, the more I felt that it was really, really true. And so I started to try and use that to my advantage. And this is what I've been doing. I started investing in property, and here's what's happened. I bought a property and it's gone up by this much money. And to me, that feels to me like, I'm getting ahead. I'm finally starting to beat that. Like, I feel like I'm finally getting ahead in a world that is trying to keep me back. I started investing in technology. I started buying Bitcoin. I started doing whatever. Here's how I started doing it. And do you know what I realized along the way in this process? I might make some mistakes, and I might even invest in some stuff and lose some money. But the reality is, if I don't do anything, the only absolute truth is that I'm going to end up losing. I'm going to get behind. I'm going to keep getting further and further behind. And so what I've realized personally for me is that the risk of doing nothing is way bigger than the risk of me trying a few things and potentially making some mistakes along the way. And that's basically like a 4-step framework that you can use in any conversation you want to have with anyone to help them go on that journey. The goal is really to move them to action. The goal is to move them forward. Now, I know there's people in my life who 2 years ago, a year ago, weren't investing. Full stop. They just weren't investing. Now they have, like, every single week they have money automatically going into investments, bang, bang, bang. And they're just like, right, they're locked in. They're locked and loaded. And the act of doing that, by the way, has changed their confidence level in life. Yep. So they haven't even achieved the financial outcomes yet. Yep. But it's completely changed. And so I think that 4-step conversation can really kind of help us to start to know how. Let me ask you, Gabby, because I know that you actually, I wouldn't say struggle with this, but this is like something that's on your mind. Like, how do you connect with people on this topic? Do you personally think that 4 R's framework would help you to have those conversations better?
Yeah, it will. It something just like a caveat with it, I guess, is also just making sure that you're being genuine. So, like the way that Goose just told it, it's how Goose would tell it because it's based on his genuine experience. So it's like, if you
Yeah.
didn't have some kind of mind-blowing realization and then you went on a quest, don't say that. Like, if you just read one thing that was
True.
cool and you wanted to share that, then share that. But don't kind of like make up and lie, because it won't. It's just not a good thing to do. Yeah, I think as well, it's trying to find the thing that will click for the person that you're talking to.
Yeah.
And so for me, and I think, you know, as we review everything that we kind of talk about and we want to try and communicate with people, one of the biggest things for people to understand is the fact that money loses value over time.
Mm.
And for me, that was a big light bulb moment that really made me go, oh, I really need to tell more people about this.
Mm.
And we've been investing for years, and that didn't click until like early mid last year.
Mm.
And that, for me, that once that locked into place, and I feel like you've had that with people as well, once they grasp that concept, it's almost impossible for them to not want to invest, because it would be so silly. It
Yeah.
would be so silly for them to just put their money in a savings account and have it lose like 10% roughly every year in purchasing power, and not try and save some of that. And
Yeah.
so trying to find that moment, that might be the moment, the realization that people in your life need to have. It might be something else. But finding those things and being able to unlock that, and starting with like one angle rather than trying to bombard with everything. And it'll take
Yeah.
multiple conversations as well. Don't expect you're going to sit down like I know you had with your friend. It was 4 hours where you went through that, but I know that even since then you still talk about it, and it's still an
Yeah.
ongoing conversation where it's gradually, education takes time, right? Changing our belief systems takes time. And so you need to expect that that is going to happen, but you will get there in the end.
Yeah. So, and I think, so what you spoke about there about once you realized that money loses value over time, right?
Yeah.
You can't unsee a truth.
No.
You can forget an idea, but you can't unsee a truth,
No.
right? And I think that,
It's-
that is gone.
No, it's just like I hate the red pill analogy, because I think it just gets thrown around and it's used in
Yeah.
weird contexts now. But it really was kind of that moment. It was like realizing something that you just can't unsee.
Yeah. And so if you can't unsee a truth, then that changes the way you view the world forever, right? You can't ignore it. You can't unsee a truth. You just can't. You can try, but it'll keep creeping back in. You just can't escape it. And so Bex had another great comment in there. For someone who's struggling to put food on the table, the risk of losing some of that money into the unknown traps them to some degree. And that is true, except if they had that realization, if they had that realization that money is losing value, by 10% every year, right? You can't ignore a truth. And so you may find it uncomfortable, and I'm not trying to be insensitive to people who are struggling to put money on the table at all, not in any way, shape, or form. I've been poor. Like at one point, I was homeless and living on my office floor, right? Like I get it. I understand. I relate. But even if you are in struggle town massively, if you knew that you were driving your car slowly but surely off a cliff, with your kids in the back, you would do something about it. You would find a way to change. And so without that knowing, then people will stay stuck. Now, it may be uncomfortable. It may be scary. It may add more pressure to an already stressful situation. But it's not okay to ignore that. So even when people are struggling, they need to know. And if they know, even if you got a couple of kids and you're struggling to put food on the table, if you knew that the path that you were on was certain to end in further levels of desperation, then you would necessarily make changes. You necessarily would. You would necessarily say, I'm not going to continue to walk this path. I have to do something different. And that could be the catalyst that creates change.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not going to prognosticate around all the ways that people may want to may implement those changes in their life, but it would affect change. It would necessarily say we can't do this. Like just imagine that you were living next to the ocean, and then somebody said, or you knew with certainty the ocean levels were going to rise by a meter, and you were not going to have a house in 5 years' time, right? You would be like, all right, well, in 5 years we don't have a house. Like, we're gonna have to do something different. I'm gonna need to make a plan. I'm gonna need to get out of here because it's not gonna work. And so understanding these things in advance helps people to make the right decisions before it gets too late. And the longer people wait, the harder it gets. So I really empathize with how hard it is for people at the moment. I really do. But we have to just face the brutal facts. Pragmatic optimism is one of my, I guess, probably core characteristics and core traits, I would probably say.
Yep.
And that is facing the brutal facts, but maintaining an unwavering belief that everything will work out well in the end. Right?
Yep.
It's being ready, willing, and able to stare truth squarely in the face so that you can make better decisions, so that you can continue to change the outcomes to what you desire. And if you're a single mom with 2 kids, trying to make ends meet and trying to put food on the table and trying to do all the right stuff, and if you knew that the path you were on was certain to create more stress, more despair, more distress, all of that kind of stuff for you and your family, you would find a way. You would find a way to do something different. Because all of your actions are driven by love anyway. All of your actions are driven by trying to care for other people. And so if people knew that the path they're on was they would be willing to take a risk because they'd realize that the greatest risk is doing nothing. And I think reframing risk is very important.
Yeah, with what was I going to say? This is good. This is good.
this is good. This is live TV, folks.
This is good. I had something good to say.
Okay.
So what we've touched about before is about how unfortunately we are attuned to avoid loss way more than we are to seek gain. And the unfortunate part of that is that it's a lot of the time it doesn't click for people until they realize the potential loss that they can have. And I think particularly like with Dashdot as an investing company, you and I are inherently optimistic people, Goose. And so for years we have always led with live your dream life, because that's what we genuinely believe. Like, investing is here to help you live your dream life. And leading with that works. But unfortunately, when people lead with messaging that is more fear-based, it actually works better because people, they use that, they're more likely to act based on that. And so applying that, thinking that with your conversations, it's like if you feel like over the years, so again, like we've been doing this for 7 years, not everyone in our life has taken action despite knowing us in the real world and us having conversations with them about it.
Yeah.
I think because they haven't, a lot of people still conceptualize investing as just like making more money, and they don't necessarily feel motivated to make more money for the sake of it. They're not as driven for that gain compared to trying to now reframe it of, okay, you don't have to be motivated by making money, but actually if you don't do anything, you're going to lose a bunch of your money.
Yeah, it's a really good,
a lot more.
It's a really good point. Yeah, because if you go around to your friends and family and saying, "Hey, look, I found this new way to make lots of money," they're going to be like, "No one cares." And everyone's going to be like, "Shut up! Like, this is not true, right?" Yeah. What about the risks?
Go to Dubai, man. Crap. Go to Dubai.
Yeah. Exactly, right. So if you go around with like, "Let's get rich," strategy, people are not going to listen to you, and they're not going to pay attention, right?
Yeah.
But you know what's interesting, just about that. So when I realized, for example, that Bitcoin wasn't a make money technology, it was a save money technology. That's actually when things changed for me. Because I always just thought, Bitcoin is some magical internet money and number go up and people are just speculating on number go up. When I realized that it wasn't a make money technology, that it was a save money technology, I was like, oh shit. Now I get it. Now I understand the utility. And so to the degree that you actually can inspire people to understand that, but they're actually trying to avoid risk. You know, even with Dashdot, and I've explained this to a few people recently, even with Dashdot, like we get exceptional returns, and you know, our clients, generally speaking, make fabulous amounts of money. It's wonderful, right? The function of them making money is not about us trying to work out how do we make the most amount of money. It's actually about reducing risk. And if you take enough risk off the table, what you're left with is returns. That's what happened. Like you've got a spectrum, and if you can continue to take risk off the table, then what you're left with is returns. And so approaching it from a perspective of, you know, trying to help people to, you know, preserve their situation, avoid risk, avoid loss, avoid failure, is actually going to help people to move forward faster. Like imagine if you could stop your money melting like an ice cream. Like imagine if the money you had today was going to be worth the same it was today as in 10 years time. Imagine if you had the same purchasing power. Imagine if you didn't, and imagine if you lost 50% of your purchasing power in the next 6.5 years. You know, so you know, all of these kind of things are actually loss avoidance conversations, and that can actually help people move forward a lot. And I just want to go back to kind of a point that we kind of touched on earlier, and it's all wound in together. But like, people are programmed to stay in their comfort zone. So even introducing these ideas to people, it's going to make them feel uncomfortable. It's going to be like, it's new information. If I start to believe that, I'm going to have to start to change. And so people will fight like hell to stay inside their comfort zone. And Neutral Rockets just shared here, it took me years to get comfortable with taking on risks to start investing. In the end, it was the fear of doing nothing that convinced me to take the plunge. But taking the plunge, just think about that. What that means, taking a leap into something uncomfortable, stepping into the great unknown. And so people are programmed to stay inside their comfort zone. They will fight like hell to stay inside their comfort zone. And my point of view, and this is the point of view of Dashdot, and this is a genuine conversation that I have with many of our team members. If we truly care about the people we serve or the people around us, our friends and family and loved ones, then it is our duty and our obligation to continue to try and save them from themselves, right? To continue to try and help them on that path. And it's kind of like, imagine if you found a cure to some, you know, chronic illness, right? Let's say you found the cure to some chronic illness, and someone in your family had that illness. Like how much would you try? How far would you go to try and get them on board with what you've got? You would go all the way, right? And so we need to be brave enough and courageous enough to walk into other people's discomfort and help them to walk out of it, right? And step into a new place, because that's the only way we're going to help people. It's the only way we're going to grow together. Otherwise, you know, we can see it happening right now. I mean, like, money printing is going through the roof at the moment. And, you know, we can see it right now. Like, so let me just quickly circle back. I was just checking on the per capita recession scenario. And so, yeah, like we're right. So we had 7 quarters of a per capita recession in Australia. We just popped out of it. And now it looks like we're about to, based on the most recent data, it looks like we've slipped back into a per capita recession. Now, what that actually means for Australians is that individuals are going backwards, not forwards. That's what that means. What that means on a per capita recession means that GDP or the economy is growing, but people are falling behind. That necessarily means that there's a bifurcation. It means that people are going one way, and wealth and money and productivity and everything is going another way. Like, that actually points specifically to a separation. That actually points specifically to more people are getting left behind whilst everything starts to move away from them. That's what a per capita recession is, right? Because otherwise it's just a recession. It's like, all right, everything's going backwards, right? Everyone's earning less and, you know, everything's going backwards. It's hard for everyone. But actually, if it's per capita, what you're actually saying is GDP is growing faster than like people are going backwards, GDP is going forwards, which necessarily means that we've got a bifurcation in our society, which necessarily means that more people are getting left behind, which necessarily means that the wealth gap is widening, which necessarily means that inequality is increasing. All of these kind of things. Now, as someone who owns a wealth creation company, right, like like we're out there trying to help people to build wealth, and it's very easy to say, well, people who build wealth are taking away from the people who aren't building wealth, and that's just not true. It's not a zero sum game at all. There is a marketplace of opportunity out there for value creation, and wealth is derived from the ability to add value to that marketplace. In the case of property investing, the solution that property investors provide is an accommodation solution. It's a housing solution for people who can't yet afford to own a home but need a place to live. They rent. That's what it is, right? And so, to the degree that a market can support that, is the degree to which that investment property would be successful. If you're in a market where there's a vacancy rate of 15%, guess what? No property investor in their right mind would want to be in that market, because there's an oversupply of products versus the actual market demand for that need, right? So you would end up with vacancies, like long vacancy periods on your property. It'd be shit, basically. And so building wealth is not a zero-sum game, and we don't need to have this demonization of this idea of building wealth. What we actually can do is we can actually move more people over to the other side of it. There are trillions of dollars of money flying around the world every second, right? All we need to do is help people to find a path to step in front of it and take some of that for themselves, so that they don't get left behind. I think that's the obligation and the responsibility that we've all got, because we can keep going on this journey ourselves, and we can say, right, I'm going to make money, I'm going to do all this kind of stuff, and live a good life. But again, just think about all the people that might get left behind along the way.
Yeah. And it's one of those things of, we're starting to see, we are seeing it in society and the impact in terms of like on everyday people, but it's going to get more obvious to more people.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things of like, you just will regret not trying harder to get through to the people that you care about in a couple of years. Like, you just will. And that breaks my heart thinking about, feeling that regret of like, I could have brought them on this journey if I just tried to have the conversation a little more. And again, it's like, everyone is uncomfortable. You go out for dinner, you try and pay for a meal, you see everyone squirm when the bill comes out. Like, nobody likes to even think about money. And you're going to face this resistance in trying to have these conversations with people that you care about. But it's our obligation, if we genuinely feel like we can see what is happening to our money, like, it's our obligation to find a way to make it cut through for the people that we care about. Because you will get to a point in a couple of years where you're like, oh, I should have tried harder.
Well, this goes back to the episode we did last week. In 5 years' time, what will you regret doing or not doing in your life? Yep. If you get 5 years further down the road and you haven't helped the people around you, you're going to regret that.
Yeah. And for me, this is why we've grown Dashdot. Like, I love business and I love being an entrepreneur and I love that whole crazy sport of it. And I love providing value for our clients. But it's ultimately, for me, it's like, I want to grow the business because I want to reach more people. Like, we've helped like 2,000 people now. And that's just insane to me, but there's still so many people. There's so many people that we can still connect with. So it's like, if we can't, and not everyone is suitable to even buy an investment property, but there are other ways that we can talk to people about investing and trying to help them get on the right side of that barbell, not bell bar.
Yeah. 100%. So I just want to make a point here. So Neutral Rockets has just commented, despite the cost of housing, the quality of life in AU is probably one of the highest in the world. Compared to the rest of the world, average Aussie is already in the top 1%. So let's just say I agree, right? But that is only one perspective to have on that. Because actually what you want to have a look at is the direction of prosperity, not absolute prosperity. So let's say Australian standard of living is in the top 1%, which is actually one of the fundamental reasons that I believe that the Australian housing market is going to continue to be buoyant over the long term, is because there's going to be significant continuous demand from the rest of the planet of people wanting to move to Australia because the higher quality of life compared to other countries, right? And the compared to other countries thing is actually really interesting, because if the progress of prosperity is slowing or declining, that means that things are not getting good as fast or they're going backwards. You can still be the top 1% if everybody else is also experiencing the same thing, right? So if the quality of life across the planet is going down, I say quality of life, objectively, like in that, in the context that we mean it in reference to Australia there. If the standard of living or the quality of life is going down in aggregate across the planet, and Australia is still number one or in the top 1%, that doesn't mean that that can still mean that Australian quality of life is going down, which I think it is, right? There is more homelessness. There's more drug use. More people are struggling financially. More people are struggling financially. There are more conversations with people that I'm having saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about leaving Australia." Like, there's all of this kind of stuff. Now, I'm not trying to disparage Australia. I think Australia is a fantastic place with an amazing opportunity, a great standard of life. But let's not kid ourselves here. Like, we can still be in the top 1%. But look at the US. That's a nation in decline. Look at the UK. That's a a state that's in decline. Look at the EU. That's in decline. Most places are in decline. So you can still be the cleanest dirty shirt in the laundry, right? It doesn't mean you're not a dirty shirt, right? So yes, Australian standard of living is objectively higher than other places, but that doesn't mean that we should be satisfied that it's moving in the right direction, because the progress of prosperity is not on the right path for most people in Australia. That is why most people are struggling to get ahead. That's why we're facing all of these issues: cost of living crises, people that are not having kids till later because they can't afford them, people that can't afford to own their own homes, people struggling to afford to rent. Now, by the way, I'm a free market absolutist. And so I think that a lot of this stuff washes itself out long term as the free market kind of dictates to things. One of the most interesting things in the Deloitte Access Economics article is that I was reading about was the catch-22, that Australia needs more homes to put downward pressure on dwelling prices. Fact. That's the only way that property prices are going to go down. But Australia also needs higher dwelling prices to attract more investment from developers, because there ain't enough margin in there, right? And so why is that, right? It's because the cost of goods and the cost of labor is so high. So until all those costs come down, or until prices go up, there's no incentive to build more. But then the demand is high. It's a catch-22 scenario. So I think it's important to maintain perspective with these things, and to not just say, well, life's good, so I'll sit here and do nothing and then watch things decline. I mean, you can look at Germany. Germany was an economic and lifestyle powerhouse for a long period of time. Their economy is cooked, basically, right? They're in a gross kind of state. There's a term called Dutch disease, right? So the Dutch were one of the global economic powerhouses across the planet for a very long period of time. Obviously, did lots of really bad stuff, lots of slavery and killing people and doing all that kind of stuff. But they were economic powerhouses there. And as a nation, they flourished, they prospered, they did all of that kind of stuff until they flatlined, right? The progress of prosperity flatlines. Now they have stupidly high taxes, and, hey, don't get me wrong, still a great place, and really, like, it's a beautiful place to visit. And you would say, objectively speaking, the standard of living is quite high there. But let's not kid ourselves around what the situation really is, because things are getting harder. It is getting harder to get ahead, and that's the real core message. And I think that we can probably wrap this episode up pretty soon. But I think that the main message that we wanted to have out of this is your personal development and your personal journey on this is very important. But you also have a responsibility to take other people along on that journey too. And I think if that's the message that we can kind of pass on here, and we can give some tools and ways, or if we've been able to give you some kind of tools and ways to kind of reframe that, and ideas to be able to go and help other people to go on their journey, I think that's the main thing we want to get across.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, Gabby, anything else you want to get in here?
I mean, I feel like we could wrap it up soon. There are probably more frameworks and things we can dig into, but
yeah, there are. But I think that I think there are, but I think that we might overcook it a little bit.
Cool.
Up to you.
Awesome.
We could talk about asset first thinking, or we could just wrap it.
What I actually just wanted to share, because you mentioned earlier about the melting ice cream.
Yeah.
I want to just take a few minutes to pull that analogy apart, because I actually just finished a workshop on Zoom for teenagers that are being homeschooled around Australia, and I was invited to do that, to just talk through money and what's happening, and trying to educate younger kids on money, and to start thinking about investing versus just buying stuff that they want to buy. And to do that, now I don't know yet how effective it's been, but I really tried to think through analogies that we could use to help that cut through, because there were kids as young as like 6 on there, Goose. And
wow.
yeah, like a couple of kids under 6, and then most are like
It's awesome.
14 to 17. So it was really cool. And I, again, I'm trying to help people to realize that money loses value over time. And the analogy I use is about, think of money as melting ice cream. And so you might be able to use this particularly in conversations with teenagers, or kids, if you're wanting to help them to understand it. So if we think about our money as ice cream, and so if we have it in the freezer, it's going to stay frozen, right? It's not going to change. But in reality, our money is more like ice cream that you put in the sun. And so we think about our ice cream as like that is our savings. And because it is sitting in the sun, it's actually melting quite quickly. And sometimes it melts in a way that it's like slow enough that you can't actually see it. So you think it's okay. But the ice cream is melting, and it can be melting 10% a year. And so, what our first thing to do before we even think about investing is to take the ice cream and try and slow the melting a little bit. That's your first mission, is to try and slow the melting, and to put it into the fridge. Instead of having it out in the sun, we can put it in the fridge. We're not going to put it in the freezer yet and freeze it. But if we put it in the fridge, it'll slow the melting a little bit. And going through this process of trying to find ways of, how can I first slow this melting? How can I first, the debasement that is happening to my money, to my savings, what can I do to slow that first? And then on top of that, we invest beyond that. And so hopefully that framework of melting ice cream might help some people to kind of have this conversation with people.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like there's a few phases with it, right? So you want to slow the melting, then you want to stop the melting, and then you want to get more ice cream, right? So
then you want an ice cream shop.
Yeah, exactly, right? You gotta turn it from something that's melting into something that's frozen, and then something that grows, right? And so, but yeah, I think it's a useful analogy. All right, guys, thanks for joining us again this week. We've got some juicy stuff coming up over the next couple of weeks. We've got some very big topics planned that we're going to do a bit of work on. So I'm very excited for that. Looking forward to seeing you next week. Gabby, I'll see you in the next room. Bye now.
I'll see you in 2 minutes. Bye, guys. See you next week.
See ya.